The Portland, New York Jane Doe, identified as Cassandra Watson. We begin today with a hiker who was walking along Chautauqua Trail in Portland, New York in 2021. It was then when a hiker would discover something odd sticking out of the dirt. The police would come to the scene and dig out what was a human skull. While in the process of doing this, they would notice a bad smell and investigate. That was when they would discover a second Jane Doe. That Jane Doe would be identified in just 3 weeks through the dental records of a missing woman named Marquita Mull, who had been reported missing from a nearby town. The police believed that most likely there was no relation between the women. One had been buried, one had not. One had passed in this decade, and one, while being found in 2021, had been buried there over 20 years. While they worked on Marquita Mull's case to identify the perpetrator, they also worked really hard to identify our Jane Doe. Our Doe's bones were sent for the DNA processing, but they would eventually fail to succeed in getting usable DNA. Eventually, another bone would be sent to the FBI for them to get a usable sample. It was puzzling to Marquita Mull's family and to the police as to how she got where she was found. She'd been reported missing in Lovejoy, New York, and this was 60 miles or 97 kilometers away. And the reason this was so puzzling is that Marquita, who often went by the name Kiki, didn't drive. She also didn't even own a cell phone. She was last seen 3 months earlier in June of 2021. Marquita had some developmental challenges, and then she had gotten in a wreck in 2012 that affected her facial appearance. She also suffered from a mental illness, but her family was clear that this didn't define her. She was a mother of 3, and she was very much loved by her family. And they would paint her as a kind, sweet person. Information would come forward eventually, although the police would decline to elaborate specifically on what it was or where it came from. But they would say that Richard Fox was responsible in the case of Marquita. Marquita Mull had been choked. The police would say that during their interrogation of Fox, he would disclose something that gave them enough to charge him not just for the Kiki, but also for that of our Jane Doe. Fox would be found guilty in February of 2025, and at this time our Jane Doe was still in the genetic genealogy process. It would turn out Richard Fox was a level 3 sex offender who had failed to register as living in the area. Level 3 is the most serious. Those at this level are considered a high risk of reoffending, which would indicate they're a threat to public safety. It's reported that he was first arrested in 1993 when his stepdaughter, whose age is shown on the screen, told authorities he had abused her since she was small. As a result of the charges, he would require to register as a sex offender. His stepdaughter suffered for over a decade, and he would spend only 3 years in prison, being found guilty of SA in the 3rd degree. They would still free him in 1997. It's worth pointing out this was only 4 years before our Jane Doe met her fate. Had he not been released, she might still be alive. It's frustrating to see people get minimal time when it's clear they go after the most vulnerable. In this case, he would be found guilty again in 2005, which we know is 2 years after our Jane Doe passed. In this case, he would be found guilty of SA in the 1st degree. In this case, he had used an item that rhymes with Fife while puncturing her neck twice. She did recover, thankfully, and he would plead guilty. It's unclear how much time Fox did, but he was released and free once again, eventually crossing paths with Kiki Mull. He lived a normal life for a while before he was caught again. And despite his criminal history, he was hired on at a warehouse in the area. He was eventually promoted to foreman, a job he would eventually lose because he had a drinking problem. Then, late in February 2025, thanks to Othram Labs, our Jane Doe would have her name again. It appeared he was living a normal life. Despite his criminal history, he got hired on at a warehouse, and he would eventually be promoted to foreman. However, he would lose his job in the end because of behavior related to a drinking problem. Then, in late February 2025, our Jane Doe would have her name again, thanks to Othram Labs, who assisted the police and FBI in this case. Cassandra Watson once again had her name. Cassandra was 40 when she went missing in 2003. She had the misfortune of trusting Fox, who she was dating at the time when she went missing. The couple had actually lived together in a home in Buffalo, New York. Very little had been reported about Cassandra as a person, and I know personally that's the part of the story that I want to know about the most. We know that Cassandra Watson had several siblings, but they had all passed away in the decades that passed after she went missing. She does have living nieces, nephews, and cousins. It was her niece who provided the DNA that would help identify her. As for Kiki, her family would say, she was a beautiful, beautiful person. Cassandra Watson was an unidentified Jane Doe for only 3 years, but the story of her loss actually started 22 years earlier when she went missing. Had she been able to live the long life she deserved, she would be 61 years old today. Had Marquita Mull not come across that same monster, she would be a 53-year-old woman today. The Hancock County Jane Doe, 1998. We begin on Friday, May 8, 1998, in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. It was here that a vehicle accidentally hit our Jane Doe. Mississippi has tried really hard over the years to identify her. In 2013, there would be an exhumation order to get her DNA. They wanted to compare her remains to 2 other missing persons, and perhaps process her DNA. Sadly, this wouldn't happen, and it never will. They would quickly discover the remains in her grave were male. There's no chance for DNA, as they have no idea where she's buried. And that means to once again have her name, someone has to identify her from the missing person reports by possibly recognizing her. The woman was of average height, around 5'4" or 163 centimeters. They believe she was about 130 pounds, which is about 59 kilograms. They thought her age was around 37 to 42 in 1998. This means she was likely born 1956 to 1961, so her peers would likely be in their mid-60s today. There may be 2 children out there looking for her. They know that she's given birth at least twice. One thing of note is her C-section was different from my scar and most of those like me who have had a C-section. The majority of us have them horizontal, located near our pubic bone. Not so with our Jane Doe. These scars heal easier when they're done the way mine was, and hers was vertical, cut from her belly button down. These incisions take longer to heal and are only done in emergencies where speed matters. Her brown hair was naturally curly and had recently been dyed a reddish brown. One clue that those who knew her may remember is that she had lung problems. She had black lung disease, emphysema, and chronic bronchitis. And she really wasn't that old. She had a moderate amount of osteoarthritis in her spine. They did note that her fingernails and toenails were dirty and jagged. This may indicate she was unhoused at the time. She had on velvet slippers, bongo jeans, and a sweatshirt that said Florida on it. The last clue is that she likely wore dentures at some time. Unfortunately, there were no dentures with her when she was found. This further supports the suggestion that she was homeless at the time. She also had some small cysts that were caused by a parasite, and those parasites are introduced when consuming something that is contaminated or prepared unsanitarily. If anyone has any idea who she is, please call the number on the screen. The Hancock Jane Doe has gone unidentified for 27 years. The Vancouver John Doe, July 1973, Vancouver, British Columbia. This case starts on a bright and clear Sunday in Canada on July 22, 1973, and this was at Pacific Spirit Regional Park. It was here that they found the remains of what's described as a healthy white male who had passed around the end of June 1973. This would be 1 month prior. Our John Doe was likely between the ages of 30 and 49, meaning that he'd been born around 1924 to 1943. This would place his peers who would be missing him around their 80s to late 90s. This is one of those that is old enough that time is really ticking to be able to identify without the expense of genetic genealogy. Pacific Spirit Regional Park is large. It's over 2,000 acres. It's not clear exactly where in the park he was found, or why they say he may have been despondent before he passed. His COD has not been provided. So obviously there's some information that hasn't been released. We know he had long brown hair and he had several teeth pulled, that he received high-end quality dental work. He had gold metal glasses, a Timex watch, and he was wearing a Palermo windbreaker. He had on a local Toronto brand button-down shirt and the brown shoes seen here. His cotton corduroy pants had flared legs, which was pretty popular at the time. He was also wearing swim shorts. There's not a lot to go on, but they do know he was 5'9" or 175 centimeters. If anyone has any idea who this man may have been, please contact the number on the screen so his family can have some closure. The Vancouver John Doe has gone unidentified for 51 years. Thank you everyone so much for watching and listening. If you aren't subscribed, please take a moment to do so, hitting the bell so you are notified of new videos. And thank you all for leaving comments and emojis to help with engagement, as well as hitting the like button. Take care of yourselves and each other.